Thank you. Amen. Welcome, oneness, and welcome to all who are viewing us online, live, and afterwards. What a beautiful morning. We are we have chosen to start January with a review of the first four parts of the Science of Mind text. It's been sort of a ritual in the past, and it really takes us back into the basics, building our foundation. And I have to admit, it's short. It's a really short part of the book, and it builds slowly. It starts wonderfully, expansively. There's some repetition to make sure we didn't miss it, right? And then he starts to build from there. So just to recap the last 2 weeks, we started the year with the thing itself and the way it works. And now today we're going to be delving into what it does. So I've talked about my beautiful mouse here, and the thing itself, it's a mouse. The way it works, well, there's a little roller ball here that helps my document to go up and down. I can click on the left, I can click on the right. But what does it do? Well, I sort of gave it away. This little roller ball, helps me scroll. But just looking at it, somebody who didn't know what a mouse was, if we put it in a time machine, even back 50 years, people would wonder, did some alien bring this to Earth, right? So today we're focusing on what it does, because we've talked about that thing. Remember, the thing is the one infinite, absolute, eternal source of all creation. Excuse me. It is that one universal mind, and that our mind, we're starting to realize mind is more than just the brain. Our mind is a part of that, right? And whatever is true of universal mind, we have the ability to access as long as we are open and willing and believe that that's on tap for us, like sort of connecting into the library digitally. And so the other part from last week is it works through an immutable law. What does that word immutable means? It means unchanging. That law that routinely, almost mechanically works the same way every time for everyone. No exceptions to that rule. Law doesn't care how wealthy you are, doesn't care how beautiful you are. It doesn't care how powerful you are in the human realm. Nope, works the same way every time for everyone. As does gravity, as does electricity. Now, sometimes we may develop a science that puts an insulation around a wire so that if we can hold that wire and it may have electricity in it, but we don't get hurt, right? So we can learn to use that law, how to apply it for definite purpose, that power for good that we can use. And so it always responds without question, without measure. The law doesn't interrupt us and say, are you sure you want to do that? Do you want to do you want to think about that again before you go ahead with this belief, this declaration? No, doesn't do that. Doesn't interrupt us. That's why we have free will. Remember last week I said, well, if we wanted to plant poison ivy in our vegetable patch, we can do that. The law isn't going to say, wait a minute, are you sure you want to do this? No, it just says, okay, you want to plant poison ivy there? Fine, I'll support you in that. And so sometimes when I teach, I liken it to God having this huge catcher's mitt, and every thought is lobbing a thought energy, and it's saying, yep, got it. Yep, caught it. Yep, okay, here it is. So when we combine that with the statement by Jesus of it is done unto us as we believe. I'm believing this. Yep, got it. I'm believing this. Yep, got it. Here it is. That's why it is so important and why Ernest Holmes is constantly urging us to be mindful. Is that what I really want to create? I might want to rethink that. I might want to change what I'm believing and what I'm asking for. And that's part of our focus for today. Another reminder, the universe is impersonal. It gives to all alike. It values each one of us alike. And that harkens back to a biblical verse. I don't have it per se, about the rain falls equally on everyone. God blesses equally on everyone. So it is impersonal. It is not also interrupting and saying, well, I see you did this and this and this, so I'm not going to respond to you. Divine law does not do that. It simply says, I heard your thought, I heard your declaration, I heard your heart, I heard where you are aligned, and I will co-create that with you. So another wonderful part about universal law is that its nature is to give. God is all good and God is always giving. Now, the thing is, we may not be receiving. And so part of our inner work can be to take a look and say, if my good isn't reaching me, let's take a look inside. What might I need to shift in my awareness, in my consciousness, that allows me to be more open and receptive to allow that good to get to me? So for example, if I said, I want to grow my prosperity, but I'm not receiving any money, and I start realizing, well, wait a minute, I don't even have a bank account. Yeah, I could put it under my mattress, but if I had a bank account, I would have a spot, a place to receive money that can grow and grow and grow and grow without limit. And so, as Emerson says, we need to get our bloated nothingness out of the way. We just need to get out of our own way so that we can be that receptive vessel and grow our consciousness of how much we're willing to receive. And that's part of the riddle of simplicity. God is this oneness that is God, the nature of God, all that is true of God is throughout every part of creation. And God is incarnate in all of creation and all people. So it starts to be the story that our awareness of this universal presence that is always waiting for us to invoke, that universal presence that is all good, waiting to be given. Our understanding of that, our awareness of that, our embrace of that starts to be a factor of how much we can receive and then also express in our lives. Because remember, God withholds nothing. It has given all. And all we have yet to do is accept that great gift and learn how to be on that receiving end. So now at this point in this third part of the introduction, Holmes starts to build on that foundation. He starts to bring some new factors in. And he qualifies the law of, well, let me back up. I don't want to say it that way. Here's where Holmes goes next. We know that God is all good and all love and is always giving, is all powerful and all wise. And so where Ernest Holmes goes next to say is that love rules through law. Now that may start to feel like, ooh, I'm not sure what I think about that. Am I supposed to be a robot? How does love and mechanical or robot go together? So it takes a little doing in there to sort of bring this across to all of us. And so what he says is that all is love, and yet all is love. All is law. All is love, and yet all is law. It's a tongue twister. So remember, we've been talking about how God is allness. And God does not, there's not multiple gods. There may be multiple capacities within this oneness we call God, but it's not multiple gods. It's all one. And so we have love as God's nature and law as the way that this love can be imparted, can be given. And it is the law through which God lovingly co-creates with us. So he likens love to being spontaneous, and that our every thought is spontaneous. And the law is always there, impersonally responding. Yes, got it, working on it. Here it is. So this can help us avoid two mistakes. One is life is not all mechanical, nor is it all spontaneous. Through love and law, we have the benefit of both. Love points the way, law makes the way possible. And he goes a step further beyond saying, the law works the same way all the time for everyone, into saying, it's calling upon us to trust in this universal law. Because we must come to understand how this is all working before we can effectively use it. That power for good that we can use for definite purpose, it's like we really need to get grounded and clear on how all of this is working so that we can effectively use it. Because it's our choice how to apply it. That goes back to the poison ivy in the vegetable patch. And he makes abundantly clear throughout the text that the law is always, with every thought, the law is there. So if we're mindful, if we're conscious and want to consciously direct the law, we can do that by mindfully and consciously directing our thoughts, choosing our thoughts. We are always at that choice point in every moment. Or we can just sort of be on autopilot, and what we're creating is off of old beliefs that still might be tucked in somewhere that we don't even realize we have sometimes, or creating off of mass consciousness. So this starts to put the responsibility into our court. In other words, we have this great capability that is unlimited. But as I said back in November, nobody can do responsibility for us. It becomes our responsibility how we are directing the law. And ignorance of this, that doesn't give us an excuse. It doesn't give us a pardon. It's so easy to sort of drop out. It's so easy to get caught out in the human realm, get into some of those belief structures or into anger, into vengeance, resentment, whatever. But every one of those thoughts and feelings is creating into the law. And so part of our practice then is being ever more observant and mindful so that we are using this powerful law and good for good reason, for good purpose, for good outcome. we've said many times that God is all knowing, all wisdom. And you may have heard people say, in God, we believe in infinite possibility. Now, that, infinite is a big word, and infinite possibility, we are so used to, so acculturated to things being a certain way and having limits to what we think anything can do. And so this invites us to start being creative even with our thought before we start into that co-creation. Like, what could infinite possibility mean? Can I really believe that? You can start creating games to stretch your sense of possibility. And so just remember that all things are possible. That takes us to a whole new realm. And it invites us to be in a playground of expansive thinking. Now, each person, each one of us are tapping that same source, but we are having different, we receive differently. So a scientist, for example, may have a different consciousness from an artist or from a monk, for example. And that tunes them into universal mind, the all good in different ways. And so what they're receiving is a little bit different. As an artist, if I received, a complicated formula, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But if there was something that came into my awareness about composition or color or something like that, I can put that to ready use. So this isn't saying, we all have access to that universal mind, and we could be receiving anything, but we again get to direct and align and choose what we want to access and receive with God and through law. So putting these together a little bit, and for that definite purpose, I'll share this story because it sort of stretches what's possible, okay? I have a few of those stories to share today. This was, oh gosh, really 20, oh my gosh, it's like 20 years back. I was living in an apartment and I was taking Science of Mind basic classes. And I started having a craving for chocolate. And I found myself thinking, okay, I could walk over to the supermarket and I could buy a chunk of chocolate. No, I'm choosing to believe that somehow there is chocolate. And somehow there is chocolate without me going to buy it. And so for like a period of a week or so or longer, I was just thinking, oh, wow, chocolate. I was remembering the flavor. I was savoring the joy of chocolate melting in my mouth. And, just, it was like a full embodiment of remembering the scent, the flavor, the feeling of it melting in my mouth, how much I enjoy that, being in that passion of that, and just that there is chocolate. That's it. It wasn't a formal prayer. We can manifest by many means. And for me, the most powerful is when everything is lined up. And so that was it. There is chocolate. Well, a week or several weeks later, I came home from a Science of Mind class, as it was, and at my front door was a box about this size. And I thought, I wasn't expecting anything. I haven't ordered anything. What could this be? And you know how there are companies that will personalize things or they'll send you things as a promotion for their business? I kid you not. Remember how big and bulky computer monitors used to be? They were really box-like. In this box was a solid, at least 5-pound chunk of chocolate in the shape of a computer monitor. delivered to my doorstep. And all I did was hold the belief there is chocolate and I don't have to go buy it. And all the, sensory, um, sensory elements that I was aligned with as well. Now, I would not have started that as thinking, oh, it's possible for me to just think up chocolate and have it delivered to my doorstep, because I allowed the universe to decide how that reached me and when it arrived. And so it is possible to create and use this teaching in definite, powerful ways. And so sometimes people will ask this question about, well, what about evil? And where does evil come from? And Ernest Holmes is very distinct and sharp on this point. And I think this harkens back to Troward, who's sort of in that, geometry proof type of statement. He says, we cannot manifest good and evil from the one source. In other words, the same source cannot create something that is contradictory and in opposition to itself. God is the one source, and God is all good. And therefore, God cannot be evil. And God cannot create something that is unlike itself. Where does evil come from then? In our teaching, we really don't use that word, although it's so prominent in other spiritual traditions and just regular human cultural thought. What we believe is that evil is the misuse of the law. In other words, remember, I could plant poison ivy in my vegetable patch if I chose to. I can choose to think and believe things that are not conducive to goodness and life. I can choose to believe all sorts of things that may not be beneficial to others. And so what Ernest Holmes tells us is that evil results from human ignorance of the law, misuse of the divine law. And we always are at that choice point, and we can always be choosing another thought. And we can make those pivots into believing something that is good and beneficial, harmonious, and life-giving, life-enhancing. He says on page 46, we are dealing with intelligence, and so we should deal with it intelligently. Now, the key for us is that we must be aware of how it works, use it mindfully by being willing to believe a greater good than what is our current circumstance, and trust in the law. This is the point where Ernest Holmes starts adding another ingredient to this recipe of what it does. He says, a statement into the law embodying a concrete idea of our desires and accompanied by an unqualified faith that the law works for us as we work with it, that a trained thought is more powerful than an untrained thought. And then he takes us into prayer. This is the first point where he introduces prayer. And just as a refresher for all of us, we have some definite beliefs about prayer. For example, we don't believe in begging God. We don't believe in trying to make a deal with God. God, if you do this for me, I'll do this. Let's make a deal. We don't, that's not part of this teaching or our way of praying and using the law. And we know that hope is sort of like a life jacket we wear to help us through troubled spots. We hold hope out as a beacon, but it's not really a definite affirmative statement. Now, what do I mean by that? I could be a student who says, oh, geez, I didn't study enough. I hope I pass that test. I'm really worried. Now, all of those are statements, and the law is receiving that. Here's the difference. Yeah, I didn't study enough, but I do feel confident that I know this material. I know that I am passing this test and I am getting at least an 87 or higher as my grade. Can you feel the difference there? Oh, geez, I hope I pass this test. I know I am passing this test. I could have studied harder, but I know I am passing this test and I'm getting a grade of at least 87 or higher. And I know that my mind is part of a universal mind and all that knowledge is part of universal mind, and that it is now part of my mind as I take this test. Vastly different. We do have that place for hope in our heart, but when it comes to definite use of the law, we like to go for affirmative statements. And that's why we call it affirmative prayer. Now, we've been taught a lot about structured 5-step prayer. But as we know with my chocolate experiment, I didn't do 5-step prayer there, but I was affirmative and I was lined up and I trusted and I believed it was possible. So the key then combines all those elements with affirmative statements. And I always teach this as the anatomy of an affirmation, that it's spoken in the first person, I or we, as a positive statement, and as if it is already a done deal, sealed and delivered. So we can play around with how definite we want to be. I was having a conversation with my son back in December, and he was aggravated about something. He said, "Oh, Mom, come on, your beliefs, money just doesn't come out of the blue." And I said, "Actually, it can come out of the blue." That's all I said. We ended the conversation there because we didn't want to start sparring over it. The very next morning, I went out for my weekly drive grocery run. And when I came back, and it was a sunny day with a blue sky, by the way, as I came up to my driveway, at the where the curb, where the road meets the driveway, was something in the road. And so I thought, parked my car, went down to pick it up. And what was it? It was a wadded, crumpled up bunch of $1 bills. I kid you not. Plop right there at the foot of my driveway, blue sky, dollar bills. That was a stocking stuffer for Christmas, by the way. Part of what this practice calls for and invites us to is to practice. Because shifting our beliefs that we have been taught all our life about what works in the human world, in the physical world, the metaphysical realm is operating differently. And it takes a while to shift that. We can spin a kayak or a canoe very easily, but an aircraft carrier, something much larger, takes 7 miles to turn around 180 degrees. So some of these beliefs that we have are like the aircraft carrier. It takes a while, but that aircraft carrier doesn't go 20 feet and then stop and say, this isn't working, right? It keeps going. with an intention, knowing that it is coming about. And that's what we're invited to do as well. And that's where the practice comes in. Start small, just keep reinforcing that. Stay in that consistent alignment of that affirmation, what you are affirming. And you can just do it by simple alignment, or through prayer, we can work, it's like work the system in some ways. It's like, this is the way the law works. And I know it's responding to me. So I am mindfully, consciously directing the thought I am giving the universe to respond to and to co-create with me. And then he talks more about faith, that we truly must have the faith that this works. And that's where practice helps us as well. Because the more we experiment with this, start with something simple, start with something small, just keep building that up. As we practice with it, it starts to become easier. Now, the one thing we cannot control is the timing. When we release, we are handing that over in trust and faith and accepting that things happen in God's time and that God always has a higher idea. So hold on here. We, you know how we always say, I'll believe it when I see it? That's human thought. Like, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. So show it to me, and then I'll come on board. With universal mind, with the thing itself, with the law, it's the opposite. I will see it when I believe it. That's a different approach. And that's sort of like one of those aircraft carriers. It may take a little bit to turn that around in our belief. But as we do so, we start to see creation, and that builds our trust and our faith as well. So in closing, every time we think, every thought, every feeling is broadcasting. And the law is like this huge catcher's mitt or radar screen that is receiving, picking up. Got it, got it, got it. So we know that every time we think, with every feeling, something happens with that thought and feeling. And that thought operates in this infinite responsive field. There's no limit to thought except the limits that we put on it. And we have the freedom to choose to expand our thoughts and our consciousness. So make it a game, make it fun. And we are surrounded by and immersed in infinite good that is willing, ready just to give itself forward to us. All we have to do is expand our thought and our willingness to receive. How much is ours? All of it. How much can we use? As much as we can believe and claim and embody. Please join me in prayer. This infinite oneness, the great spirit that is the source and substance of all creation, this perfect power and presence that is everywhere, in every moment, in every place, in every situation, is everywhere active. This infinite possibility, absolute wisdom and intelligence, this loving, all loving, all giving presence. This is what all creation is created from. And God is an expansive presence that is always ready and willing to bring forth greater good. You and I, each one of us, are inseparably one. For we are a creation of God, and God is incarnate in, as, and through us. And so I know on behalf of all of us, we are learning and reaffirming these fundamentals, the all good, that great power that we can use for definite purpose. And we are choosing to be that emanation that is loving, that is inclusive, that stands for justice, that is always about the joy of greater good for all. And we know there is no limit to God. God never runs out. And so we have the liberty of claiming, of affirming, and knowing, believing, and trusting that goodness is equally available for everyone. And how wonderful that feels, how wonderful the world is as we bring this forward into experience. And we know that this starts to come about through each and every one of us. As Adalia so beautifully said, the song in our heart, that harmonious chord that we can, thank you, amen on this, that harmonious chord that is music to our heart, to our soul, to our consciousness, to the world, to all creation. Each of us individually, but aligned with God in harmony, harmonious balance in harmony with each other. And so we choose, game on, God, game on. I'm ready to, we are, on behalf of all of us, I claim this. I am ready to expand my consciousness. I am ready to expand my creativity. I am ready to play with creating in an affirmative way. And I am so grateful and so grateful that I can be a power for good for all. And what a blessing that is. I accept and I am willing to be mindfully creative and to receive God's good. Thank you, God. And so it is.